Senator from Hawaii.
Thank you, Madam President. I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Madam President. 8 years ago, let's start over. Madam President, 8 months ago, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And sometimes when a major bill is passed, its effects are not immediate. But that's not the case with this legislation. Since the IRA was signed into law, more than 100 clean energy projects have been announced. These include solar, wind, hydropower, battery manufacturing, electric vehicle deployment, and clean tech investments. And if it seems like I'm excited, it's because I am. They are in rural areas, they are in major cities, and everywhere in between in more than 30 states, from Idaho to Louisiana to Ohio to Arizona. Collectively, these projects have created more than 100,000 new jobs for electricians, for mechanics, for construction workers, for technicians, and more. But these 100,000 jobs are only the beginning. A report from the University of Massachusetts projects that the IRA will create more than 9 million jobs over the next decade. I want to repeat that, 9 million jobs over the next decade. That's manufacturing jobs for wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles to make our power grid more resilient and our roads less polluted. It's construction jobs to make our homes and our buildings more energy efficient and lower costs for families and for small businesses. And it's environmental jobs to support farmers, to protect fisheries, and to restore our public lands. Investments supporting these new jobs and projects are already near $90 billion. And with financial analysts projecting a multiplier effect of $1.6 in private sector investment for every dollar of public spending, even the most optimistic projections about the IRA's impact seem low now. A Credit Suisse report analyzing the bill estimates that we'll see double the amount of clean energy that the bill was initially projected to accomplish. Double the amount of clean energy. And new analysis from Goldman Sachs puts the impact even higher, triple the amount of clean energy that we were contemplating. This shift is already happening in Colorado, where it is seeing a rapid expansion in clean energy development. D.R. Richardson, who runs a business electrifying homes with heat pumps and induction wiring, said about the change, quote, "We are having a hard time keeping up with the demand. The Inflation Reduction Act has been a massive tailwind for us." In Michigan, the state's manufacturing background and embrace of electric vehicles could lead to as many as 34,000 new clean energy jobs. According to researcher Aaron Brickman, quote, "There's a strategy, there's a plan, and the benefits are already being seen. Michigan is poised for an economic boom." In Texas, a massive $4 billion investment to create the country's largest green hydrogen facility was recently announced. It will also generate 1.4 gigawatts of wind and solar, enough to power nearly 750,000 homes. In the words of Seifi Ghasemi, CEO of the company behind the investment, quote, "It will be competitive on a world scale while bringing significant tax, job, and energy security benefits to Texas." And that's really what the IRA entails: new jobs, energy security, and a cleaner planet. But there is an opponent to this progress. The opponent is the fossil fuel industry. They've gotten rich digging up oil and burning coal for generations. But now we're seeing the energy of the future, and it's not fossil fuels. They know that they've lost, so the industry and its supporters are attempting to stall this progress by throwing whatever they can find at it. They're pursuing litigation. They're pushing NIMBYism, not in my backyard. They're trying to stop clean energy projects through the state public utility and public service commissions. They're attempting to hijack the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and through this CRA, they are trying to grind solar manufacturing to a halt. And so if you hear this debate around this particular Congressional Review Act resolution, which we are contemplating today, it's not actually about this. There's a bigger story here, and the story is this. We finally took climate action that wasn't small. We finally took an action that was equal to the moment. We finally took action that is equal to the obligation that we have to future generations, that is equal to the opportunity for the United States and the entire planet to move forward on clean energy that benefits everybody, that lowers costs and saves our planet for the future. And so when they come after this particular action of the Biden administration, don't get lost in the weeds. They have lost. They are dead-enders. They know that. And so they'll pick up a Congressional Review Act here, or a Public Service Commission over there, or they'll gin up a bunch of NIMBYism over here, or they'll introduce another bill over there. But this is part of a story where for the first time, and I mean this, because it's been decades of us getting our butts kicked, for the first time, we're taking the kind of climate action that can actually make a difference. And they're terrified. And that's what this CRA is all about. We can choose more manufacturing jobs, or we can choose less. Energy security, or a continued dependence on foreign dictators. A forward-thinking outlook, or a mindset from the past. That's what this CRA is ultimately about. And despite the arguments the dark money apparatus of the fossil industry is making, it doesn't change what they are. They're arguments that belong in the past. It's the equivalent of a payphone tycoon failing to adapt after the iPhone came out. But we don't have to be beholden to an industry whose strongest days are in the past. No matter what happens with this vote, the demand for solar panels made in America is not going away. The demand for energy-efficient homes and electric vehicles is not going away. The demand for renewable energy is not going away. The IRA was not a one-off, but the first, most meaningful step in the transition to the clean energy revolution. And the forces opposing this progress will be forced.
Senator Schumer will be joining us shortly, but I'm so glad to have our great chairman of the Finance Committee, Ron Wyden, and Senator Amy Klobuchar is here, and Joanne Jenkins, AARP Chief Executive Officer. AARP has been such an important voice in all of this. Brad Woodhouse with Protect Our Care, Executive Director, also a very important voice. And Irv Barconi from Virginia, who's going to share his story about how the changes that we've made are really making a difference in his life. Let me just take you back a few years in Michigan. 1998, as a member of the U.S. House, was very involved in these issues, taking on the drug companies, and I started taking busloads of seniors from Detroit to Windsor, which was about 5 minutes across on a bridge, international bridge, to demonstrate the fact that all you had to do was cross a bridge and you could drop your prices 40%. But you shouldn't have to go to another country to make that happen. And so what we did in the Inflation Reduction Act was take on Big Pharma, and we won. What we did a year ago is bringing down costs, particularly for seniors and people with disabilities. Just from a Michigan standpoint, nearly 673,000 Michiganders will save an annual $356 thanks to the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap. Nearly 67 Michiganders on Medicare are now charged no more than $35 a month for their insulin. And we want to make that something available to everyone. I see our leader here. I know he's laser focused on making sure that $35 cap is all on every, for everyone who's on insulin. And in Michigan, nearly 1.8 million seniors can receive free shingles vaccinations and other crucial vaccinations. And what I'm also very excited about, we've not focused on the fact that under Medicare Part B, we have said, and Chairman Wyden had put forward this policy, that out-of-pocket costs should go down if the companies are charging more than the rate of inflation on prescription drugs under Part B. Every 3 months, the administration is looking at it, and the latest numbers show that average out-of-pocket costs have gone down as much as $449 a dose. This is treatment you get in a doctor's office or in a hospital. It's a cancer treatment or others. The average dose has gone down $449. And of course, Medicare is beginning to negotiate prices just like the VA. So we know there's more to do. The Inflation Reduction Act was a wonderful first step. I'm so proud of our caucus and our president for standing up to Big Pharma, one of the biggest lobbying operations in Washington, D.C. We took them on and we won, and we're going to continue to stand up for people who need to know that they can afford their essential medicine. So I'm going to turn this over to our great leader, Senator Chuck Schumer.
Majority Leader's recognized.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, today the Senate will continue making progress on the NDAA, one of the most important bills of the year, and something that for more than 6 decades has passed with bipartisan support. Yesterday, we adopted 2 important amendments to the NDAA, adding to the Senate's work on outcompeting the Chinese government. Both amendments, one by Senators Cornyn and Casey, one by Senators Round and Tester, passed overwhelmingly with 91 yes votes. It's not often that 91 senators can unite on a single measure, let alone 2 measures. So to see us unite on outcompeting the Chinese government was an important demonstration that this issue remains broadly bipartisan and something we'll continue working on throughout the year. This morning, we will hold another vote on an amendment by Senators Warnock and Budd, halting the harassment of our service members by debt collectors. I hope this will also enjoy broad support. And last night, we sent an outline with a number of additional amendments. I'm hopeful we can lock in an agreement soon to begin voting on some of them. Since last Wednesday, the Senate has voted on 8 amendments here on the floor, adopted 7 more by voice vote. This is how the process should work. Finally, I'll also keep working with the Republican leader, with Chair Reid and Ranking Member Wicker, on a second manager's package that will have more accomplishments both sides can embrace. And I appreciate the cooperation and good faith of my colleagues from both sides of the aisle. Mr. President, I've said repeatedly that the NDA is an opportunity for the Senate to show we can work on the biggest issues facing our country through bipartisanship, cooperation, honest debate. That's what we've seen play out so far this year on the floor. Bipartisanship. The NDA process in this chamber is a welcome departure from the contentious, chaotic, and partisan race to the bottom we saw in the House. And, as I have also said, if we continue embracing bipartisanship, we'll finish our work on the NDAA before the start of the August state work period. We wish to finish the NDA as soon as we can. There is no reason for delay. We aren't quite there yet. There's still some more work to be done. But we are close. I thank my colleagues for their cooperation, and the Senate will continue working on the NDAA until the job is done. On the IRA anniversary, when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act last year, I said here on the floor that it would endure as one of the defining legislative feats of the 21st century. And just 1 year later, the IRA is paying huge dividends for the American people, for our economy, and for our environment. Republicans claimed the IRA would make inflation worse. One of our Republican colleagues claimed the IRA would cut jobs and fuel inflation. But, Mr. President, since we passed the IRA, inflation has gone not up, but down. We are lowering costs day by day for the American people with the passage of this legislation. Inflation is now half of what it was a few years ago. Across the board, costs are coming down for the American family. For the first time ever, we've made it possible for Medicare to negotiate the price of prescription drugs, helping Americans save at the pharmacy. Because of the IRA, vaccines are free for Medicare beneficiaries, and a cap on out-of-pocket drug spending. No senior will have to pay more than $2,000 a year for drugs. It's coming very soon. What a relief for people, lowering costs on one of the things that bothered them most, the high cost of prescription drugs. That's what we Democrats are doing, while over there in the House, the Republicans are just racing to the bottom. We also capped the price of insulin for seniors on Medicare to $35 a month. spurring major companies like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk to follow suit. And millions of people who buy their health insurance on the ACA exchanges are now saving hundreds of dollars each month. Indeed, we are lowering costs. That's what we promised to do. On top of these savings, I also said the Inflation Reduction Act would kickstart the era of affordable clean energy and create countless good-paying green jobs. The Inflation Reduction Act has done just that, too. From the new wind turbine facilities in New York to solar facilities in Arizona, the IRA is paving the way for America to lead in clean energy manufacturing. 80 new clean energy manufacturing facilities have been announced across the country, employing thousands and thousands of people, and not just in junky, low-wage jobs, but in good, high-pay, high-skill jobs with training to boot. Again, these new facilities mean even more good-paying new jobs for years to come in construction, manufacturing, clean energy, and so much more. And as the new jobs are being created, wage growth continues to go up. It's now exceeding inflation. So the amount brought home in your paycheck pays more than the cost, has gone up more than the cost of goods has gone up. That's a new thing. Only happened in the last few years. And the policies that we have passed here in the Senate, that Democrats have passed here in the Senate, frankly, are making a huge difference. And of course, we're only getting started. As we continue implementing the IRA, the American people will see more evidence of the Democratic agenda working for them. And on AI, finally, with so much going on in the Senate, I want to remind my colleagues, today we will hold our third all-out Senate briefing on artificial intelligence. Our presenters today are Rick Stevens from the Department of Energy's Argonne National Lab, Dr. Setharam Nathan from the National Science Foundation, and Dr. Kathleen Fisher from the Information Innovation Office at DARPA. And finally, our moderator will be Dr. Jose Marie Griffiths, member National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence and president of Dakota State University. It's a broad range of presenters. The last few briefings were well attended. I know people are busy today, but please try to make the time. And the Q&A was surprisingly very direct, and we got a lot of answers and learned a lot. So I look forward to my colleagues at the briefing, but surely will be an illuminating and important discussion, and I thank everyone for their good work.
Remember what the experts told us, okay? And they're traditional economists, very smart women and men. They told us, getting inflation under control, in order to do, we had to lower wages and increase unemployment. Not a joke. Had to lower wages and increase unemployment. But we never thought the problem was too many people, at least I didn't, too many people that were working, or the working people were making too much money. I thought that was not the best answer to how to get it down. Now, one reason we've seen inflation fall by 2/3 without losing jobs is corporate profits are coming back down to earth. The excesses are being eliminated by the corporations. We have more to do, but inflation is now the lowest point it's been in 2 years. When the Inflation Reduction Act was passed a year ago today, inflation was, as it pointed out by Chuck or Nancy, I can't remember which one, 8.3%. It's now down to 3.2%, the lowest among, and it's going to go lower. But here's the point, it's lowest among the world's leading economies. Take every major economy in the world, we have the lowest inflation rate. At the same time, wages are growing faster than inflation. This matters. The way I think about inflation is the way my dad used to talk about it around the kitchen table. Not a joke. I'm being deadly earnest about this. He'd ask, how much is left after all the monthly bills are paid? How much do you have left over after you pay them all? And is there, at the end of the month, just have a little bit of breathing room? Just a little bit of breathing room. That's one of the reasons why we've worked so hard dealing with farm and other things. Not only to get the overall cost of average people with the monthly bills down, in addition to inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act is giving people more breathing room, as my dad would say.
You both enumerated what this is doing for people's pocketbooks and the broader economy, but there is this broad disconnect in what the polls have shown with how Americans feel the president's handling the economy. I understand the pandemic and all the drag of inflation. At what point does this resonate with Americans, and do you expect they'll ever give credit to the president while he's in office for these accomplishments?
Well, just speaking to the healthcare provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, some have been recently implemented. The $35 cap on insulin, making vaccines for seniors, for shingles and tetanus and other items free. Those have just recently come on board. People will experience lower drug prices from the Medicare and drug negotiation and from other steps we've taken over time. So I have some experience of working on the Affordable Care Act, and it took people a little bit of time, but when people really focused on that, back in 2017, 2018, people recognized the true benefit and really rose up to defend the law. So we expect, my expectation is that as we implement these provisions, as people see in their pocketbooks that they are paying less for prescription drugs for the first time because of the Inflation Reduction Act, they'll make the connection. But we should be really clear that the provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act are incredibly popular. I mean, 80% of the American people, 75% of the American people, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans support lowering healthcare costs, support ensuring Medicare can negotiate drug prices and other provisions as well.
On the solar manufacturing industry and what's next for that industry, can you share a little bit about what the administration intends to do to build on the tax credits in this legislation, given that the U.S. solar industry is still dependent on foreign supply chains? Manufacturers are warning about high interest rates and cheap imports and other headwinds.
Well, first of all, we've seen a boom in solar manufacturing announcements in the United States. We expect it to increase by 8 times just between now and next year from the beginning of the administration. Credit Suisse did an analysis that suggested that 90% of solar deployment in the U.S. will be supplied by solar manufactured in the United States. Solar panels manufactured in the United States. So there are issues with the supply chain, and we're working on those, but we think that the boom in home manufacturing made in America, putting people to work here, is on its path to resolving that question. And I think that's true. We saw the major announcement of a $2.5 billion plant by Hanwha Q-Cells in the state of Georgia, as the president likes to say, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, which is the full solar supply chain, working with a plant that's producing polysilicon in Washington down to producing wafers, ingots, and cells in Georgia. So this is an issue that we are taking cognizance of, and we're doing what we can to support it through grants from the Department of Energy under the bipartisan infrastructure law, obviously through these, particularly the manufacturing tax credit, so-called 45X credit, and through other policies that we're utilizing to reshore and build those products here in America. But I was with the president in Columbia, South Carolina, I guess now 4 weeks ago, where a company called Enphase, which had invented an important piece of technology for the solar industry called microinverters, was manufacturing those products in Romania, in Mexico, and in China. Now they're coming home, being made in South Carolina, with 2 other announcements about to come of other places where manufacturing will happen in the United States.
Folks, thanks for the introduction, and Scott, thank you very much. You know, I want to thank Vice President Harris, members of the Cabinet, Secretary Vilsack, Administrator Reagan, you know, members of Congress, particularly Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, who played such a pivotal role in getting this bill done. Everyone was telling us there was no possibility with the divided Congress the way it was we could get it done. And he got it done without a single vote in the other team, although that began to change at the end. And all the special guests state and local leaders, business leaders, entrepreneurs, advocates. You know, 1 year ago, with your leadership, I signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. And one of the most significant laws I think has ever been enacted. Taking on the special interest and winning, and winning. Delivering on promises that have long been made to the American people to lower costs for families, especially health care costs, increase America's energy security, restore fairness to a tax code, create good-paying jobs here in America, and to address the existential threat of climate crisis. You know, it's part of a much broader vision for our country, growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. I'm a capitalist. If you can go make $1 billion, go make it. I'm all for that. Just pay your taxes. But because when the middle class does well, all kidding aside, everybody does well. Everybody. The poor have a ladder up, the middle class have a good shot, and the wealthy do very well. The Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal initially called my plan Bidenomics. I'm not sure they meant it in a totally complimentary way at the time. But guess what? It's working. Our economic plan, made possible by all of you in this room, and that's not hyperbole, created more than 13,400,000 jobs, new jobs, since I took office. Nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Where is it written that America can't create the most vibrant and innovative economy and be the world's leading manufacturer again? Where's that written? I didn't see that anywhere. We created more jobs in 2 years than any administration has in a single 4-year term. And I'm very proud. I'm very proud that unemployment has been below 4% for the longest stretch in over 50 years. Below 4% and going down. We now have more jobs than we did before the pandemic. And workers aren't just finding more jobs, they're finding better jobs, higher pay, higher job satisfaction. And unemployment is down, and so is inflation.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wyden. When I first arrived in this building a couple years ago, Senator Klobuchar, one of the first things she brought up was the cost of pharmaceuticals, drug prescriptions for the American people. Well, this is the beginning of the end for Americans getting the short end of the stick from pharmaceutical companies peddling prescription drugs. For years, we've all been paying much more than those in other countries pay for the same drugs. But now, Medicare is taking the first step towards ending that stranglehold on life-saving drugs. Let's be clear, this is not some unfair assault on global drug companies. Rather, this is a transition that's going to give Americans the same opportunity to afford life-saving drugs as others in other countries are given. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, the U.S. spends far more than any other industrialized country for prescription drugs. From getting charged $150 more for Xarelto, which reduces the risk of coronary artery disease, to getting ripped off by paying $1,600 for Enbrel, an arthritis drug. Eliquis, a very common blood thinner and one that I have occasion to use myself, prevents blood clots, but costs an extra $500 and $514 out of pocket for Medicare enrollees in Colorado. In Germany, it's only $96. It's 5 times more in the United States. Why should we pay more than Germans and Canadians and the Swiss? What possible rules of common sense should permit drug companies the right to charge us many times more than what the rest of the world pays for the same drugs? Part of the answer is that up until now, we've let them. Medicare, the largest buyer of prescription drugs in the United States, has never been allowed to negotiate the price of drugs with pharmaceutical companies. And as Senator Wyden was making painfully clear, the losses to the American people have been substantial. Until now, Medicare has had to accept whatever price Big Pharma dictated, even when Medicare knew we were subsidizing the rest of the world. Well, that changes today. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act we passed last year, Medicare finally has the ability to negotiate with Big Pharma and get us a fair price for these drugs. Medicare will take the 10 most expensive drugs each year and negotiate their prices down. But the impact goes far beyond the impact just on seniors or just for those 10 drugs. First, every year, Medicare will negotiate down the 10, every year, Medicare will negotiate down 10 more drugs. So the cost will keep coming down each year. In future years, Medicare will be able to negotiate even more drugs. Second, because Medicare is the largest buyer in the American market, there's a darn good chance that other big buyers, like private insurance companies, are going to negotiate to bring the price that they pay down to what Medicare will pay. A falling tide lowers all prices. So what exactly does that mean now? Medicare has announced the first drugs it will negotiate. They include the two I've mentioned, Xarelto and Enbrel, along with 8 others. 4 of the drugs treat diabetes. The others treat or prevent blood clots, heart failure, kidney disease, blood cancers, and arthritis. In 2022, Medicare enrollees taking these 10 drugs paid $3.4 billion in out-of-pocket costs. That's what they paid out of their own savings. The average per enrollee cost was a staggering $5,247 for the most expensive drug on the list, Imbruvica, which treats blood cancer. It's a big deal in every state. It's a big deal in my home state of Colorado. Over 100,000 Medicare enrollees in Colorado take these 10 drugs. 43,000, including me, take Eliquis. This is a blood thinner to help prevent blood clots with an average out-of-pocket cost of over $500. 21,000 take Xarelto and pay $447 average out-of-pocket cost. The bottom line, seniors on Medicare are getting ripped off. And from going forward, they're going to spend less. They are finally going to spend less on the prescription drugs that they need, in many cases, just to stay alive. And if all goes according to plan, the rest of us will also pay less once insurance companies follow Medicare's lead. Now, this isn't a fix to all the problems in the healthcare system in this country, but it's a pretty big step. And it's a reminder that we're not helpless to fix the other problems we face that are still out there. All it takes is the will to come together and get things done. Hopefully, this is just the beginning. I yield the floor.
I now recognize Ranking Member Porter from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We had a major heat wave harming portions of the United States during most of July and August. And in Southern California, where I live, we saw temperatures get as high as 110 degrees. Mr. Higgins, if you were experiencing this kind of extreme heat, what would you turn on in your home to keep yourself safe and comfortable?
The air conditioner.
The air conditioner. We'd all prefer to turn on the air conditioner. But not every American can afford an air conditioner, let alone pay for the energy needs of that system. I know a resident of California's 47th congressional district who got frustrated during the heat wave. They got literally hot and bothered. Throughout the summer, they didn't have air conditioning in their home. And this constituent is concerned about the increase in temperatures, the air quality issues with wildfires, and they want to buy an energy-efficient heat pump to cool their home, bring down their heating costs, and reduce their dependence on volatile fossil fuels. But she can't just go spend the money because she also needs to replace her broken gas stovetop, which has one working burner, and her 20-year-old dishwasher. Mr. Higgins, how can the Inflation Reduction Act help this Californian afford a heat pump and lower their bills without breaking the bank?
Thank you for the question. It's for the first time, there are new incentives for heat pumps because of IRA. It includes a tax incentive of $2,000, but that only helps households that have the tax liability. So there's also a program to create rebates for low-income households, which will be administered through the states, which for participating households, it can cover up to the entire expense, including installation and electric upgrades.
Okay, so this household has tax liability, so I think they're going to be able to get the $2,000 per year for a heat pump. This sounds like this really would help this Californian be able to afford this heat pump, really bring down the cost, reduce the carbon footprint, help her save money on energy bills in the long term. Mr. Higgins, can this hot and frustrated Californian go get this heat pump using this credit?
Yes, and Treasury is working on guidance right now.
Oh, stop there, Mr. Higgins. This Californian is hot today. Can they go get a heat pump using this credit today?
They'd have to wait until the end. They file their taxes to get their rebate, but Treasury is working on the guidance to make that much clearer so that by next summer, this will be a much smoother option for households than it was this summer.
So right now, the Department of Energy, Department of Treasury, they're still preparing to roll this out.
That's right.
So it's been a year since the Inflation Reduction Act passed. And as a practical matter, I think it's cold comfort to a lot of people to hope that they can figure out somehow with TurboTax how to get this credit. They want to be able to go in the store and get it for less now, up front. When can this Californian go do that?
So as soon as the Treasury puts together their new guidance for 25C, which is that part of the tax credit, which they are expecting, I think the Treasury just announced that was one of the next priorities they were working on for the end of this year, so that it'll be in place for the next tax credits in, I think, a way that's much more intuitive than it was this summer.
Okay, because the Department of Energy's website says that DOE expects households to be able to access these rebates in much of the country in 2024. You're talking about Treasury and the credits. So this Californian, without air conditioning all summer, has to wait basically another year to get an energy-efficient heat pump. You testified that these households can save hundreds of dollars. You gave aggregate figures. Did you adjust those aggregate figures downward for the fact that nobody's been able to use these programs yet?
No, those numbers are based on the projections of once this is implemented. So I agree with you that these programs are still being rolled out, particularly for the consumer-facing credits.
Yeah, you might be interested to know that this Californian is me. Like many Americans, I want to reduce my greenhouse gas emissions, I want to save money on my energy bill, and I would like air conditioning. And many of us can't make our homes greener, and we have heard about this Inflation Reduction Act. We have heard about these tax credits, but we are not able to take advantage of them. I understand that the Treasury's working on it, that DOE's working on it, that the states are working on it, but the takeaway is the Inflation Reduction Act is the law of the land. How each of us feels about this law isn't going to change, but we can make the law work. We can ask tough questions on a bipartisan basis about what the holdup is. And I personally think it would be a much better use of this committee's time to conduct meaningful oversight of how the programs are being rolled out and whether they are working as intended to relitigate whether we should have passed this or not. So we can continue to go back and forth on whether this bill is good or bad, or we can get serious about trying to conduct oversight on whether it is actually helping people and what we need to do to push the administration to deliver. I yield back.
Committee will come to order. First, let me welcome our newest member, Senator Alex Padilla from California. It's so good to have him, and so everyone knows the changes that were made. Senator Kelly was a tremendous asset for this committee, but he had an opportunity, and I think it was a wise move from his standpoint to be able to go on to Intel with all his background, his training, and everything of that sort. So we lost one and gained one. So I think it's about a pretty good swap. I think it was a pretty good swap. Anyway, but we're good. You know, Senator Padilla represents the largest number of Americans, the second largest consumption of energy from his state. And I know he'll dive right in so many important issues, including hydrogen, forestry, wilderness, Western water, and other issues of importance to California that our late, great Senator Feinstein worked on diligently, and we got an awful lot of input from her on this committee, but also from all of you, and we appreciate that so much. So with that, we'll get started. I also want to briefly express at the outset my strong concerns about the news last night that our administration has lifted most sanctions on Venezuelan oil for the next 6 months. On the heels of announcing the smallest 5-year offshore oil and gas leasing plan in decades for the United States, administration's turning to Venezuela, and they know I have a problem. I'm sure maybe you all have all different feelings on this. They're one of the world's dirtiest energy producers and an oppressor of its own people. And to help make up the production, that we are not doing what we can do more for ourselves. I understand that the administration believes that it will encourage Venezuela to make democratic reforms. But that's been tried, and we failed before. It makes no sense at all to reward bad actors before they actually take the action you want. We tried that with Iran, and now here we are with Venezuela. But now turning to today's topic. When I look back to when I became ranking member of the committee in 2019, we had not done a comprehensive update to our nation's energy policy in over 10 years. Since then, we've worked hard to address that gap. First, we set our energy policy goals in the Bipartisan Energy Act of 2020. Then we provided the investment needed to make those policies a reality in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. These bills will transform our nation's energy landscape for years to come. I'm extremely proud of these pieces of legislation and the opportunities within them that will make us more energy secure while creating good jobs across our nation. For instance, I was pleased to join a bipartisan group of federal and state lawmakers and business and community leaders to welcome Secretary Granholm and Undersecretary Crane to West Virginia this week, Monday, to announce that the Appalachian Regional Clean Hydrogen Hub won a $925 million award to bring a hydrogen hub to West Virginia and parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania, which is the 3-state region. This funding, which came from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, will ensure West Virginia will be able to be a new epicenter of hydrogen in the United States of America. It's just one example. In the past 2 years, our state has celebrated announcements for battery manufacturing plants, carbon capture projects, microgrid-powered industrial sites, with many more projects on the way that stand to benefit from the DOE support. I will mention that tomorrow I go for a groundbreaking for Nucor Steel. Nucor Steel has just signed a contract with Helion, which is a fusion manufacturer. And they're intending by 2028 to have a Helion fusion manufacturing plant for clean hydrogen to make clean steel, be the cleanest in the world, being made in West Virginia. We're extremely proud of that, and that opportunity is unbelievable. In the case of our hydrogen hub, the private sector is proposing to invest up to $6 billion on top of the nearly $1 billion from the DOE. So if you look at the $1 billion we have, that's a 13% investment the United States is making for a $87 billion return, 87% return, if you will. That's a tremendous thing for us to incentivize in that and basically be willing to share some of that risk that makes these projects possible. The story is also similar across our country. The private sector announcements pouring in as a result of opportunities created by our laws, and all of us should be proud of that. While I'm thrilled to see all these impactful investments being made, it's also disheartening to witness this administration distort the intended purpose of the laws to fulfill the agenda. And they know, I think we've had these conversations, that sometimes we're ahead of our skis and we just want to keep them in check. The laws were deliberately crafted to secure energy supply chains, but so far we've seen too many indications that this administration is willing to sacrifice security to pursue their unrealistic anti-fossil goals. The most apparent example of this is through the implementation of the IRA's EV tax credit. That credit was designed to encourage automakers to onshore their supply chains in order to break our reliance on China, who has dominated the EV supply chain. Unfortunately, actions by this administration to cut the sourcing requirements in half and water them down in other ways just to get more EVs on the roads, Chinese or otherwise, clearly are not a reflection of the text or intent of the IRA and infrastructure law. Not only is the administration violating and manipulating the law to implement the legislation they wanted rather than the bills that we passed, but the decisions they are making will have detrimental impacts on American workers and embolden our adversaries. There is a bipartisan agreement that these laws must be implemented as written as Congress intended to secure our own country's energy supply. This is why our committee expressed bipartisan concern at a hearing earlier this year when DOE was considering providing a grant to Microvast, a battery company with alleged links to the Chinese government. While DOE ultimately made the correct decision not to award this grant, and I thank you for that, this administration's actions as a whole have made me question what aspects of the laws are at risk of being manipulated. So I felt it was important to invite Department of Energy here today, and Mr. Crane, we're so glad to have you, and thank you for coming, to discuss your approach. And Mr. Shaw, you also we're looking and anxious to hear from you of these new important laws, and especially the review of the department's due diligence process for companies and technologies pursuing grant funding or loan guarantees. I have two primary questions for our witnesses. First, how are we ensuring that U.S. taxpayer dollars are absolutely not benefiting any of our adversaries? And I think we even have named our adversaries that we're very much concerned about, whether it be China or Russia, North Korea, Iran. And second, how is the department ensuring that companies receiving awards have proven technologies worthy of government support to commercialize them? The IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law are an investment in American energy security, protect ourselves and our allies while breaking our reliance on countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and other nations who do not share our values and should not be relied upon to provide critical elements of our supply chains. While I was pleased to see the DOE rescinded the Microvast award, I am alarmed that the company was able to get through even the first round of vetting. We continue to hear about our company seeking to use taxpayer dollars to make a devil's bargain with Chinese technology providers, like Ford's potential licensing deal with cattle, seeking to qualify for IRA credits or the conditional loan approved by DOE for core power that involves purchasing technology from a Chinese firm. Let me be clear, I do not want, and I do not believe any of our committee members wants a cent of the funding benefiting China in any way and being held hostage. So I hope today's witnesses will shed some light on the vetting process to make sure China and Chinese companies are not turning taxpayer-funded American innovation into a windfall for our geopolitical adversaries. Between the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Department of Energy received nearly $100 billion to support new or existing energy advanced technologies, grid modernization, and clean manufacturing programs. Both bills emphasized an all-the-above approach so that we can innovate, not eliminate, our way towards a cleaner environment, while at the same time increasing our energy security and creating new economic opportunities here in the U.S. These bills were designed to be balanced and ensure that the best technologies of all types win, not just those favored by any given administration. Historically, DOE's loan program office has fallen short of a balanced approach. If you look at the chart here, it shows you that basically where we're investing our dollars. And 41% went to electric vehicles and clean transportation. Solar was 22%, nuclear was 22%, distributed energy storage transmission was only 7%, wind was only 3%, fossil hydrogen geothermal is 4%. Now, if you look at where our energy comes from today, 81% comes from energy production and fossil fuels and cleaner innovation. 81% with a 4% investment. 8% is nuclear power. Nuclear, 22% investment, 8% right now. And renewables. You can look at all the renewables. 13% is where we get our energy from. So we have a long way to go, but we have to be realistic enough to know where our power is coming today, that we don't short-sight it and get the cart in front of the horse and say, go ahead and start pushing. It doesn't work that way. To correct this, the IRA created the new 1706 loan guarantee program specifically to support investments in our dispatchable fossil fuel plants, such as adding CCUS or other environmental controls. I'm also pleased to see that the LPO is supporting a number of hydrogen projects, a proven technology that we just have not focused on commercializing until the past few years. It's my hope the department will adhere to a balanced approach moving forward, and I look forward to hearing how DOE is taking that balance into consideration as they work through the decision-making process for these important funding opportunities. I'd also like to hear the department's plans to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent efficiently, effectively, and responsibly. Without a doubt, the department's energy loan programs have had successes over the years. And it's notable that the interest on loans returned to taxpayers has exceeded losses in investments by roughly 4 times, 4x over. That's excellent. That being said, it's no secret that problematic projects from previous years are still very much on our minds. Mr. Shaw, I hope you are able to assuage any concerns this morning about the efficacies of the loan programs and demonstration how the department is working to prevent the next Solyndra. Being responsible with all this funding also means DOE's offices should not be working in a vacuum. There needs to be a cohesive strategy to ensure that we are not duplicating efforts and missing key gaps. So I hope that we can hear from Mr. Crane this morning about how he works with Mr. Shaw and other offices within the DOE and across the agencies to make sure that funding is being used in the most effective and efficient ways possible. If implemented effectively, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act have the power to truly transform our country for the better. And that is why it is so important that we get this right. I will provide all the support I possibly can to DOE to help the agency get it right and achieve Congress's intent. But at the same time, it will be of no surprise to hear that I fully intend to continue our committee's robust oversight of the department, which is our jurisdiction and responsibility.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to first point out that it's ironic that in a discussion largely about so-called woke issues, that this is the least diverse panel I've seen in my 9 years in Congress. I love you. You're just like me, middle-aged white businessmen, but we don't represent all the American people. Second, I'd like to point out that, jumping on what my friend Mike Thompson said, in all of the community service work I've done, the incoming emails, 120,000 a year, not a single person has ever raised a woke retirement plan agenda to me. So I'm not quite sure what we're talking about. I also would like to, I love my friends on the other side. They're mostly really good people. I disagree with my friend Dr. Drew Ferguson, though, who says that the only purpose of a business is to make profit. I've been in business 46 years, and we thought part of our job was to serve the customer, to provide good customer service, good products. Part of our job was to hire people who could then build their lives, buy homes, educate their children. I thought part of our job was to serve the community in the best possible way, to strengthen America. And that this notion that Milton Friedman capitalism was the only way to go forward doesn't match the values of almost any business person I know. I know my friend Kevin Hearn, who did very well with McDonald's. I'm sure he was not just about profit. It's important, you know, Edward Deming says the very first rule of business is to survive. So you have to do that. And let me also just mention that my friend Mike Kelly talked about when you go home to Erie, Pennsylvania, people are still hurting. Yes, absolutely, people are still hurting. We have income inequality like we haven't seen in 100 years. Right now, we're dead last in the G7 countries in income inequality. 69% of our wealth is controlled by exactly 10% of our population. 2.5% of our wealth is controlled by half of our population. It's never been that bad. Inflation has slowed, but prices got really high, and they're not going back. I often fantasize about what would happen if Donald Trump had won in 2020. What would my Republican friends have blamed the inflation on? This wasn't too much money chasing too few goods. It was enormous supply chain disruptions and a tripling of the profit margins of virtually every business. In the meantime, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, CHIPS and science. All these things are long-term investments. We had labor productivity jumped to 4.7% last quarter, the highest probably in our lifetimes. We're at 4.9% GDP in the third quarter, again, close to the highest in our lifetimes. The JOLTS job I looked up this morning, 9,553,000 jobs advertised. Again, a 2-to-1 ratio, which we've never seen before. But all these are long-term, and it's going to take a while for people really to feel the benefits of it. So let me, Mr. Reese, I want to turn to you. I was fascinated by the notion that in a debate about freedom, as a business person, I never wanted people to tell me how to invest my money. So why are we telling North Face and BlackRock and others, Carlyle, all these, I'm confused. I never thought BlackRock and Carlyle were the drivers of global socialism, as I'm hearing today. How can this be? Why should we be telling them how to invest money that people are put in their care because they want to maximize their investment? Why isn't the freedom for let business leaders invest it as they think proper? Because my reading, word for word, from the last thing is that, I don't know if I have it right in front of me. The 2022 AFL-CIO says, the rule clarifies retirement plan fiduciaries may consider, but are not required to consider, ESG factors just as they would consider any other investment factor. Mr. Reese.
That's exactly right, that the 2022 DOL ESG rule protects the ability of retirement plan fiduciaries to consider ESG factors when they're material to investing. And I don't care if you're considering an investment in China or an investment that involves environmental sustainability or workers' rights concerns. Those factors matter for investment returns. And if you put blinders, you tell retirement plan fiduciaries they have to stick their heads in the sand and ignore these ESG risks, you're doing a grave disservice to the retirement security of America's working families.
It would be interesting to see, I just read that October was the warmest October since we've been keeping records for many hundreds of years. Do you think it might be responsible for an investment manager to think about the downside cost to our environment and our economy of all the things that are coming from climate change?
It would be imprudent not to consider those factors.
Great. Thank you very much, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
President.
The senator from Hawaii.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I just want to acknowledge Leader Schumer for his extraordinary, personal, compelling, and essential remarks on the rise of anti-Semitism across the country and across the planet. It was needed, it was accurate, and it touched me. So thank you, Mr. Leader. Now on a different topic. Madam President, we are about to see the beginning of COP28. That is the annual international meeting to take climate action. And this one is a little different because America finally took historic action on climate, and it is working. And so the message that America will be bringing to this COP28, which begins in Dubai tomorrow, is that we finally did it. We finally took the biggest climate action in human history. Is it enough? No. Is it more than we've ever done before? Absolutely. It's more than we've ever done before. And the COP is a unique opportunity for governments across the world to work together and coordinate their response to what is the greatest challenge of our time, the climate crisis. Climate change is getting worse by the year, and it's affecting more and more people in every corner of the planet, including all of us in the United States. Recognizing that, Congress took the biggest climate action in American history a year ago with the Inflation Reduction Act. In addition to setting targets to dramatically reduce carbon emissions in the United States, the IRA also made historic investments to accelerate the transition to a clean energy future. It was an ambitious piece of legislation, but the truth is the IRA's impact in just a year has surpassed even the most hopeful projections. And none of the parade of horribles that the fossil fuel industry articulated ended up happening. Prices did not go up for regular consumers, the economy didn't crash, and all of the things that, frankly, the clean energy side said was going to happen, and some of it, in my view, was aspirational, like hundreds of thousands of new union clean energy jobs, it actually is happening. So everything we said was going to happen, happened. None of the things that they were fearing would happen, did happen. And it's working faster and better and more powerfully than even our experts were able to project. But there is still more to come. The IRA is proof that big, bold climate action is not just possible, but it benefits everyone. and it offers a roadmap for the rest of the world. As my dear friend and family member, may she rest in peace, Madeleine Albright, always said, we are the indispensable nation. The United States is the indispensable nation. And I look at the presiding officer, and I think you know this. When we go abroad, it is a little shocking the extent to which people are hanging on tenterhooks, wondering what does the United States think? And you don't need to be the head of state for people to still be especially tuned in to what's the United States going to do, what are they going to say, what actions are they going to take. And finally, after the first COP where we organized, through President Obama's leadership, global climate action, and we had some momentum, and then we lost our momentum. Federal action on climate basically ground to a halt. So we were going to these COPs to say, hey, we're still in. We're still committed to climate action. Yes, it's true that we weren't able to do something this year or last year or the year before, but we're still in. And it was hard to make that case year over year over year as the indispensable nation while we try to tell everybody to take climate action, and we hadn't yet done it at the scale that was necessary. Well, this is different. Now we've done it. It's working. It is equal to the task in front of us, and every other nation should capitalize on this opportunity and do their own version of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a real chance for us to put words into action. We've been talking about what to do about climate for years. It is time to finally put the resources and the money behind those pledges as time runs out. What absolutely cannot happen in this conference is that it cannot be co-opted by fossil fuel interests. Too many oil and gas companies are paying lip service to addressing climate change, all the while actively expanding their fossil fuel enterprise. Just this week, we saw alarming reports that the host of the COP was looking to cut deals with countries on oil and gas projects. Now, I know that he denied that. I know that the reporting is somewhat mixed, and I don't begrudge UAE chairing this COP. It's a rotating COP. It goes by region. UAE gets to chair it. That's not the problem. The problem is the extent to which fossil energy companies, the American Chamber of Commerce, and other international corporations have decided to bear hug this process to undermine it. And we have to be very, very wary. If there are fossil companies or energy companies that are both on the clean and the fossil side that want to be constructively engaged in how to take climate action, that's great. But we will be damned if we allow these companies to bear hug the COP process to the point where it becomes meaningless. And so myself, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Cardin, Senator Heinrich, Senator Markey, and others will be watching this like a hawk. On another note, the Senate is about to vote on the first of two Hawaii nominees to the U.S. District Court, Micah Smith and Judge Shanlin Park. Both of them have had distinguished careers in law and public service and are extraordinarily qualified to serve as United States District Court judges. Micah Smith has been a federal prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office for over a decade, most recently in the District of Hawaii, where he serves as Deputy Chief of the Criminal Division and Criminal Civil Rights Coordinator. Those who know him are quick to highlight his balanced temperament and deep commitment to equal justice. Likewise, Judge Shanlin Park spent 2 decades as a public defender giving voice to those most in need and has brought her integrity and sound judgment to the bench as a state court judge. Both of these nominees represent the very best of Hawaii and will represent all of us well on the judiciary, and I urge my colleagues to vote to confirm them both to the federal bench. They both had a bipartisan vote in the Judiciary Committee, and I'm looking forward to a bipartisan vote on the floor. I yield the floor.
President.
The senator from Maine.
Madam President.
On the Inflation Reduction Act accomplishments, this morning the American people received more proof of that the Biden and Democratic agenda is working. The Labor Department reported today that year-over-year inflation in November slowed down to 3.1%. At the beginning of this year, it was more than double at 6.4%. And remember, last summer, before we passed the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act, inflation was over 9%. From 9% all the way down to 3.1%, we've made big progress. Meanwhile, the labor market remains strong. Jobs are up, higher than they were before the pandemic. And listen to this, investment in manufacturing construction, plants that will turn out goods that we can consume here and export, is at a 20-year high, more than double its highest under the previous administration. There's a lot of talk from the previous president about jobs. He did very little. This administration, with what we have done, is really producing jobs, jobs, jobs. No one should be surprised, Mr. President. Thanks to the Democratic work on the IRA, 2023 has been a banner year for American job creation and for American manufacturing, at the same time getting inflation and the cost to American families down. In 2023, dozens of companies have announced new investments in the U.S., resulting in hundreds of new clean energy projects and creating tens of thousands of new good-paying jobs. And that's just 2023, Mr. President. The Inflation Reduction Act is projected to create another 1.5 million jobs over the next decade. According to the White House, private companies have announced more than $600 billion in investments across the country, many spurred by the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's not just through manufacturing the Democratic agenda is paying dividends. In a few short weeks, seniors, for the first time, will have a cap on how much they pay for prescription drugs, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. This is life-changing news for seniors across the country. Never again will a horrible diagnosis mean $10,000 or more to get the drug you need to approve. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, insulin is also capped at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. And vaccines are now free. Let me repeat that. Vaccines are free, improving health care across America and helping people be healthy without having to pay for it in terms of things they can't afford. Drug makers are penalized if they raise prices faster than inflation. The administration is negotiating right now for better prices for 10 of the highest cost, most commonly used drugs in Medicare. And because ACA premiums are becoming more affordable, this year we're seeing a record number of Americans sign up for health care on the individual marketplaces. It takes a lot of work, but Democrats' agenda is paying off. Costs are coming down, jobs and opportunity are going up, and while there's a lot of work to do, the American economy is on the right track. I yield the floor.